Welcome to Mission Evolution Radio Show with Gwilda Wiyaka, bringing together today's leading experts to uncover ever-deepening spiritual truths and the latest scientific developments in support of the evolution of humankind. For more information on Mission Evolution Radio with Gwilda Wiyaka, visit www.missionevolution.org. And now, here's the host of Mission Evolution, Miss Gwilda Wiyaka.
We've all heard of mind over matter and positive thinking, but can we think ourselves into health? Mission Evolution Radio TV show is coming to you on X-Zone TV, www.xzonetvchannel.com, and X-Zone Broadcast Network, xzbn.net. We're produced by Relmar McConnell Media Company with studios and corporate offices in St. Catharines, Ontario, Canada. With us this hour to discuss thinking ourselves into health is Ellen J. Langer. Ellen was the first woman to be tenured in psychology at Harvard, where she's still a professor of psychology. The recipient of 3 Distinguished Scientist Awards, the Arthur W. Staats Award for Unifying Psychology, and the Guggenheim Fellowship, and the Library Science Genius Award. Dr. Langer is the author of 12 books, her latest, The Mindful Body, Thinking Our Way into Chronic Health. Her website, ellenlanger.me. Ellen, thanks for joining us on Mission Evolution.
My pleasure.
So let's start out with, tell us about your experiments in social psychology.
Oh, gosh, there's so many of them. I've been doing this for 45 years, so I don't know where to begin. But I think maybe some of the most relevant to what you've already said are early experiments we did with the elderly. And essentially, we gave them choices to make, which I've later understood as a way for them to be more mindful, and they live longer. And this was one of the earliest studies in mind-body medicine, and it was very different from what other social psychologists were doing. To me, this life and death was the ultimate dependent measure. They are dead. You can argue with me about how to explain it, but the finding was crystal clear and surprising, to say the least. And so the question was, how do you get from this fuzzy thing called a thought, making some choice, to the body actually changing? And that set me up for decades of research to answer that question. And I can answer it now, or I can wait until you ask me.
Well, we'll continue on, and I'm sure it'll come up. So what is positive psychology?
Okay, so psychology in the distant past was geared toward understanding all sorts of negativity, aggression, mental incompetence, and so on. And the positive is not just the opposite of the negative. So if you imagine, for argument's sake, you're a person who believes the glass is half empty versus it's half full. Well, if you believe it's half empty, you're spending all of your time trying to find water. You're spending your time being worried that you're going to be very thirsty and so on. And you can't get from that to the positive, which is now that your thirst concerns are non-existent, you can go about being. And so my research, while the field was studying all of these negative things, I was doing research again with the elderly. I hesitate, Gwilda, to use that expression now that I'm as old as I am. So it's tenured people, seasoned people rather, that the research we did was to make people feel in control of their lives. And so that was very different from studying learned helplessness and debilitation. And then the next study I did was giving people a way to deal with stress. People who are in the hospital. And that was also positive. So it was the beginning of lots of studies and going forward. And now there are hundreds, if not thousands of them, seeing how we can improve various aspects of our lives. What's fun for me about my studies is that they're very small things I'm suggesting that have very large ramifications. And so they're not hard to put into place. So even the nursing home studies here, we had people realize that they were still able to make decisions for themselves. That was it, you know. And then the results were they were happier, healthier, and actually lived longer.
It's amazing the power of coming out of victimhood, isn't it?
Yeah, really.
So, so how do our thoughts affect our health?
Well, okay, so I wrestled with this for quite some time, and had been thinking even from my very earliest experience. Let me tell you, this is kind of fun. I was married when I was very young, and we went to Paris on our honeymoon. And so now I'm 19 going on 30, right? Trying to be very sophisticated. And we go into this restaurant and I order a mixed grill, and on the mixed grill is pancreas. Well, I asked my then husband, who was more sophisticated than I, which of these is the pancreas? He points to it. I eat everything else with gusto. Now the moment of decision, could I eat the pancreas? I start eating it and I literally get sick. He starts laughing. I say, why are you laughing? He said, because that's chicken. You ate the pancreas a long time ago. Well, so I had made myself sick with nothing more than a thought. And so in thinking about this over the decades as I'm doing all of this research, it occurred to me that mind and body, these are just words. And if we put the mind and the body back together, okay, rather than, if you see it as two things, then the question is, how do you get from one to the other? If it's one thing, you don't have that problem. And so we've done many, many studies, I'll tell you about some of them in a moment, where we put the mind in unusual places and take the measurements from our body, where we don't have to ask the question, how do you get from here to there? So all of the work, now the world has been coming closer to this, way back decades ago. The medical model was such that one's psychology, one's thoughts were totally irrelevant. Right. That I'm sure physicians at the time wanted people to be happy, but they didn't think that was going to affect their health at all. The only way you were going to get sick was the introduction of an antigen. Now, most people believe in a mind-body relationship. I'm not talking about a relationship. I'm talking about it's one thing. So the earliest study we did with this is called the Counterclockwise study. We retrofitted a retreat so that it looked as if it was 20 years earlier. And we had elderly men live there as if they were their younger selves. So they spoke about the past event as if it was just unfolding and so on. They lived this way, for a week. In that short time, without any medical intervention, their vision improved, their hearing improved, their memory and their strength. And they looked noticeably younger. And that was the results are striking, to say the least. And so that set the stage for a host of studies that we've been doing ever since.
The ultimate time machine, right?
Yes, yeah, in some very real sense.
So we've tended to treat the body and the mind as separate. How, as you were saying, how has that impacted health?
Well, I think to see the mind and the body as separate, it's almost as if you need a hammer to fix things, and you have a hammer there, but you don't realize you have a hammer there, so everything is broken, and then all of a sudden you wake up and say, hey, because the point here, if mind and body are a single unit, then we have enormous control over our health by changing our thoughts. Now, in some way, people already know this, not just because, they're walking down the street in the fall and a leaf blows in their face and they get startled, their blood pressure rises, their pulse, their breathing changes. Nothing's happened, right? It's a leaf. But the thought that maybe it's something big caused those physiological changes. But even more than that, most people are aware of placebos. Now, think about a placebo. You take this pill that's nothing, right? It's a sugar pill. It's inert, or else we wouldn't call it a placebo. You take it and you think that it's something, and then you get better. And I think it's almost all diseases for almost all the people taking placebos heal in this way. So if it's not the sugar pill that's making you better, what's making you better? You're making yourself better. And so my work, in some sense, is designed to do this more directly. Why do I have to go to a physician to give me nothing for me to do the work myself anyway? So, yeah.
So we've all heard it's all in your mind, as if in your mind it
Yeah,
isn't real.
exactly. That's the killer. I mean, it's really so interesting. I think that placebos may actually be our strongest medicine. Now, think about it. The placebo came into being to help test a drug. So people would get either the real drug or this make-believe drug. Right. Now, these studies were important to the pharmaceutical business, right? To bring a drug to market, it had to outperform the placebo. So placebo's got a bad name, right? But it's actually, remarkable when you think of all the things we can do to heal ourselves. So when people think it's all in the mind, then they feel responsible, they feel foolish. Why do I have this thing if it's not real? And it's a shame that things evolve that way. But my mission, Gwilda, is to turn all that around.
That'd be a good thing, because instead of having to figure out the right drug, we'd have to figure out the right mindset.
Exactly, the right thought. Right.
Interesting. So most people are, I hate to say this, but most people are kind of unconscious of all the thoughts going through their mind.
Oh, that's not just that they're unconscious of the thoughts going through their mind. There aren't thoughts going through many minds. Okay, so I've told you, I've been doing this work on mindfulness and mindlessness for maybe 45 years. And the one thing that's really, really clear from all of these, so many studies, is that virtually all of us are mindless almost all the time. We're not there, but we're not there to know we're not there. And your question to me was?
I was asking you, what about all we are unaware of the thoughts that are going through our mind that are impacting our health?
Yeah, that I don't know what to say about that our thoughts, every thought affects your health. And so if the thoughts, as you're calling them, if you're unaware of them and they're negative, it's going to have a negative effect on you. It's just that simple. That when you're depressed, the body is sort of slowing down, and you need those neurons firing to feel alert and active. When you're depressed, you sit, your shoulders are back.
Well, we're going to have to pick up on being depressed on the other side of a station break. Okay. Ellen and I will return very shortly, so don't go away. This is Mission Evolution, www.missionevolution.org. Decisions. Do we ever really make them? With us this hour discussing the power of body-mind agreement is the author of The Mindful Body, Thinking Our Way into Chronic Health, Dr. Ellen Langer. And of course, we're going to open this one up with that particular question. You state we never really make decisions. Would you explain, please?
Yeah, it's so different from what people think. Even the experts, I think, have this one wrong. That things are either psychologically the same or they're different. Now, if they're the same, there's no basis for any decision. And that's mostly what we find ourselves. Decision-making is important for people to understand because it provides, it's the reason for so much stress that people experience. And stress is the worst thing for your health, okay? So listen carefully. Let me give you the bottom line first to your listeners. Rather than waste your time trying to make the right decision, instead make the decision right. Okay, so I'm saying that you can't make the right decision. There is no right decision. And the reason there's no right decision is that every consequence is understood as either good or bad. Each consequence can be understood in both ways. So if I said to you, Gwilda, do you want to meet my friend Jane? She's very impulsive. So a decision, you'd say, no, why would you want to meet her? But if I said to you, Gwilda, do you want to meet my friend Jane? She's very spontaneous. Yeah, let me meet her. Well, spontaneous and impulsive are the same thing. Consistent and boring are the same thing. Inconsistent and flexible, and so on. And so it turns out that consequences are in our heads, the meaning of the consequence. Things just happen. And then we understand them one way or the other. If we mindfully understand them, take a deeper, more open look, you can't add them up because the same thing is positive and negative, and that's going to add to zero. All right, put that aside for just a moment. Now, people think that you're supposed to gather information. Okay, well, gathering information can be good. You learn about whatever the information is you're gathering, but there's no natural endpoint to how much information you could take in, which means as soon as you say, oh, that's what I'm going to do, well, maybe I'll look at one more piece of information. It can turn things around entirely, right? So you look at just those two things, but I write about this in so many papers and books that there are so many other reasons that making decisions and the way people think, you see, let me say something here. People make decisions the right way. The problem is they think they should be making them differently. All right. They at some point, just give up and say, I'm going to do this thing. When you're making a decision, this gets a little more complicated, so stop me if you want, that you're using predictions. Should I have an apple or a pear? The only way a decision between those two things makes sense is if I can predict right now how that apple is going to taste, and I can predict how that pear is going to taste, because otherwise, how can you go forward here? Now, your biology is now different from the last time you had an apple or a pear. This apple is different from the other apples. It could be less sweet, sweeter, so on and so forth. So the fact that you can't predict, again, makes decision-making difficult. This is sounding harder than it is. So let me tell you how to do this. And I did this with my class. This is at Harvard, an advanced decision-making class. And I say to them, after I explain what I just tried to explain not so well to you, I want you to go through the week until we meet again, not making any decision. Randomly choose. You could have a rule. It could be whatever the first alternative is that occurs to you is what you're going to do. Okay. And they do this for a week and they come back. I said, so how was it? It was glorious. There was no stress because I gave them the permission that they didn't have to engage in this cost-benefit analysis. And I think that we would do ourselves a favor if all of us realize you're making a decision. The things you're deciding between are the same or they're different. If they're the same, doesn't matter. So let's say I ask you, Gwilda, do you want A or B? How could you possibly have a preference, right? Now you gather information and you find out A is $10 and B is $1,000. There's no decision to make, no complex calculation. You're just going to take the $1,000.
So I'm trying to follow here.
Yeah.
Are you saying that decisions are illusionary in a certain regard?
Well, no, the process where you give yourself options and then you go through some some data gathering, information gathering to make the decision, that's not illusory, that's real. The problem is it doesn't lead to a good or bad decision. That people need to understand. Let's step back a little bit. The outcomes that all of us take as good or bad are not good or bad. That's in our head. Right.
So are we looking at, okay, the outcomes are neutral. How we respond to the outcomes is what makes them good or bad.
Exactly.
So it doesn't
How
matter
we
what
understand them. Yeah, exactly.
It doesn't matter what decision we make. We just make the best we can then out of the outcome.
Right. And we just make it work. So let's take a hard one. Should a young woman, she's just married, she has to decide, does she want to have children or not? You only live one life. You have no idea when you don't have children what life is like if you have children. If you have children, you have no idea what your life would be like if you didn't have a child. And there's no way to know. Now, what people need to understand also is you make a decision to take an action. Once you take an action, the whole game has changed. So let's say, somebody's trying to decide, should they go to Harvard or Yale? So they go to Harvard. Oh, I don't like this. And they say to themselves, I should have gone to Yale. Well, you have no way of knowing. The experience at Yale could have been better or worse or the same, however you're going to make it. But you're not able to try that other alternative because now you're a different person now that you've spent a year at Harvard.
So if you're trying to make decisions, and like it was between Harvard and Yale, and you get there, and all of a sudden you say, like you said, "Oh, I should have done the other one," and so we experience regret.
Yeah, regret is mindless.
Aren't we kind of shooting ourselves in the foot there,
Yes.
rather than making lemonade out of lemons, or not that it's lemons, but just moving forward? This is my decision. I'm going to go on with
Exactly.
it.
That's exactly what people should be doing. But they need to, in doing that, realize there's nothing else they could have done. You can't do something. That's what it's like. I'm not going to try the other. That's what it's like. Try the third, because you become a different person in each of those scenarios. And so the regret that people experience is mindless. It presumes that you could have lined all of these experiences up and selected one. And it also suggests that the unchosen experience would have been better. That's why you regret not taking it, when again, it could have been worse. It itself is nothing. It depends on how we understand it. But it's the fool's errand to choose one thing and spend their time thinking about all the glorious aspects of the unchosen alternative.
Sounds like marriage. So being indecisive. Okay. We see a lot of people that are indecisive. I've always been a very decisive person. I go the direction it seems like the best at the time, and then I just go with it.
Well,
But some people, they're this or
yeah,
this or this
yeah.
or this, and
But that's very
mindful.
mindful. Yeah, people who are ambivalent, who go back and forth, are going back and forth because there are so many. Here are 10 good things. Here are good things there, and you go back, and they're very mindful in noticing that. What's mindless is the presumption that there's a right decision. So they keep thinking, if they keep going through all of this, something is going to seem right, and it doesn't work out that way. Now,
What
but when you said
ask-
there are people, I'm sorry, but there are people who can't seem to make decisions and others who can't. Most of us fall into both camps. I can buy a car in an hour, major purchase. But if I'm buying a candy bar, it can take me, forever. Okay,
So what then? Let's bring it back to ground zero. What impact does indecisiveness and regret have on our health?
well, anything negative is going to. Okay, let me answer that in a somewhat different way, because I didn't really explain to your audience what mindfulness is as we study it. Has nothing to do with meditation. Meditate, is good, but it's just something different. All it is actively noticing things. And as you're actively noticing, the neurons in your body are firing. And all of the data show that that's literally and figuratively enlivening. Now, when you're suffering regret, when you're depressed, the system is turning itself off, because you're thinking one thought over and over and over again. And it's the novelty that turns out to be good for our health.
So when you're in regret, you're not in the present moment to notice anything,
Exactly.
really. You're
Yeah,
in history, right?
exactly.
Okay. Okay, that makes sense to me. So why, we've been going over this, but is there a key to break up that difficulty in making decisions? I mean, a lot of people suffer from this, and it sounds like it's hard on our health.
Yeah.
So is there a key to that lock?
Well, yeah, I think that's why, that's what I'm trying to do, is to unlock these doors, give people permission to randomly choose. And when you do this a few times and you see that, gee, it's all worked out, it just continues. That there is no way to know what the right decision is. Whatever you're deciding is something in the future, and you don't know what you're going to want or be like in the future. And one of the things that people can look at are the things that happened to them that they thought, oh my God, this is going to be terrible. That turned out to be nice, and to help them realize that this process is cumbersome and in some ways irrational. And this may be even more complicated for you, but let me throw it out. Even the decision to make a decision. Now, how would you do that? Because you can't do a cost-benefit analysis, because the decision to make a decision, had you make that decision, had you make the decision to make that decision, it's an infinite regress. And it's all, pretty much a waste of time. We do it because people will say to you, how could you have made such a stupid decision? And so you have to justify it. So you have, well, I looked for this and I gathered this information.
Well, I'm
I'm
going to have to justify us going into another station
Okay,
break.
I'm sorry.
No problem.
Right.
Ellen and I will be right back to continue our discussion. So you stay right there. This is Mission Evolution, www.missionevolution.org. What is our true potential and how can we reach it? This is Mission Evolution, missionevolution.org. With us discussing the positive impact of unification is Dr. Ellen Langer. Her website, ellenlanger.me. And with that, I'll have to ask you, Ellen, how many of us really live our potential?
Very few. And I think even those who think that they're at their maximum are not nearly close enough. That there are things in our language that reveal our being less accomplished than we actually could be. If you were to get somebody to try to do something, you'd say, try, right? And the word try seems very positive. So we have all these expressions that seem positive, but really aren't. You wouldn't try to eat an ice cream cone. You just eat it. So we did, some simple studies where we have one group, we say, do it, and the other group, try. And the doing outperforms the trying, because most of us expect a little bit, at least, a failure. And that keeps us from fully engaging whatever we're doing. I did this thing with my class. Now, one of the mind-body unity studies that we did is we have people in a sleep lab. They wake up and we've changed the clock unbeknownst to them. So they've gotten 2 hours more sleep than they actually got, 2 hours fewer, or the amount of sleep they got. And what happens is cognitive and biological functions follow the perceived amount of sleep. All right, we have lots of studies on fatigue. Now, people think in the same way as you need the sleep, and rather than your thoughts control how much sleep you actually do need. People believe that you probably couldn't run more than humanly possible to run more than maybe 30 miles without stopping, because a marathon is 26, right? And so I did this in my health class, and I asked them, it became like an auction. I asked, how far is it humanly possible to run? And 30, 35, and then somebody yells 50, and everybody groans. Then I turn on YouTube about the Tarahumara, which is a tribe in Copper Canyon in Mexico, who can run over 200 miles without stopping.
Oh my goodness.
The difference between 50, and I couldn't run 50, right? I can't do a marathon either. The difference between the 5 miles you think you can run, or let's say the 30 that you thought was humanly possible, and the over 200 that people are actually doing, is about the difference in general. And I believe where we are with respect to anything we think we can do and where we might be. We have all sorts of beliefs, like as you get older, the system wears down. Your vision gets worse. Your strength, your memory, everything just sort of goes downhill. And if you expect that, then you don't do things to support the opposite view. So, but remember in the counterclockwise study, where we had elderly men being their younger selves, and their vision and hearing actually improved. We had this fun study with vision. You know, the typical eye chart, the letters get progressively smaller. So
Yes.
I'm odd. It's clear to me that I'm odd. When I'm in the doctor's office reading the eye chart, I say, wait a second, this is rigged. You know, it's setting up an expectation that soon I won't be able to see. So we did fun studies. We reversed the eye chart. So now the letters are getting progressively larger. And that means your expectation is soon you will be able to see. And what happens is people can see what they couldn't see before.
Okay, so
Right.
my question is, it'll probably lead us on further with this. Are you telling me that the expectations we've been given by our culture are what's causing us to age, causing us to get sick, causing us not to live our potential?
Yes, exactly. And well-meaning people,
Oh, yeah, for sure.
but yes, I think that in some maybe simple way, you get what you expect. That so let's take memory. People believe as you get older, your memory is going to worsen. Now, what happens then is that every time you see yourself forget something, you start to get nervous. You start to worry about are you going to get dementia and so on. And all of that keeps you from fully living. And it's that mindful living where the neurons are firing and it ends up, as I said, literally and figuratively enlivening. Or a different example, let's say you're talking to a 20-year-old and a 20-year-old hurts her wrist. She's led to believe her wrist isn't supposed to hurt. So she does things to make her wrist better. Now, I am 77. If I hurt my wrist, too often people of my age will say, what do you expect? As you get older, you fall apart. So in a very direct way, she's taking care of her wrist. I'm not. Certainly down the road, my wrist is going to be worse than hers, having nothing to do with our age, everything to do with the difference in our expectations.
So I remember one time I was listening to a person and somebody had a really great idea, and he says, "Oh, well, yeah, but the harsh reality is, okay, we are programming ourselves with these harsh realities.
Exactly.
How do we turn that around?"
Well, you listen to programs like this and play them every day so you can pick up different pieces to it. You have to question. Okay, so science can never show you that something can't be. It can't show you that you can't improve your vision, that your hearing can't improve. All science can do is show that whatever you tried didn't work. Right? So to believe that things are possible will lead people to try things that, if I have a chronic illness and that the medical world has led me to believe that there's nothing I can do about it, I'm not going to do anything about it, right? If I start to realize, wait, nobody can know that, then I'm likely to try different things.
So
And it's in that,
you just described these miracle cures that
yes,
somebody I'm terminal. The doctor said I had a week,
exactly,
and
exactly.
they said, "Oh, I'll show you." Okay.
No, exactly. Yeah, and I think that it's interesting because we've talked now a little about mind body unity, and I recognized just the other day that people don't even have body unity. They don't realize that the whole body is connected. Now, what that means is if you're having stomach problems and the medical world tells you there's nothing they can do about it, they're simply wrong. If you make the rest of your body stronger, since your whole body is one thing, you will be stronger, and that very well might have a positive effect on your stomach or whatever organ we were talking about.
So, like, it frees up more physical energy because you're
Yes,
stronger to deal with the problem at hand.
exactly. Yeah, very good.
So, can we learn from our bodies how to operate our minds?
Um, Sure, I think we can learn from whatever we're attending to. I think that sure, if we notice that at some moment when you thought you were scared, that your body is sort of relaxed, it can work backwards. Say, yeah, well, wait a second, my body is not telling me that there's something to fear right now. Maybe I'll stop telling myself these scary stories.
We sure are full of scary stories, aren't we?
Yes, yes. But
Well,
I think
what
I think that your insight, pointing this out is very important, and I'm glad I've had the opportunity to tell people that you can never know that you can't do something, and that trying is the whole game of life. People think that they want complete success. A fun little story is: imagine you're a little kid. I'm sure you've had this experience. You're in the elevator and you're trying to press that button, but you can't reach it. All right. And then your mother or father pick you up and you press the button. Okay. And then you get a little bigger. And then at some point, you press that button. You're able to reach it. Okay. When, as an adult, has pressing the elevator button ever been exciting? All right. It's the not being able to do and the potential of being able to do it that's exciting. People think they want complete success. If you played golf, you might think, oh, wouldn't it be wonderful if I could get a hole in one every time I swung the golf club? In a very short time, you'd learn there's no game there.
you'd get pretty
All right.
bored, wouldn't you? Yeah.
Exactly. So people need to understand that it's not the fact of mastering something, having mastered, that feels good. It's the act of mastering, which means that you don't want it to be too simple. You don't want to be sitting there spelling 3-letter words once you know how to do them. So we have to change our understandings about failure and see the lack of success as momentary. It's on our way. And recognizing that when we finally master whatever it is, we're just going to have to find something else to do because, spelling 3-letter words, pressing elevator buttons, it's just not fun as an adult.
But if we're really invested, our self-esteem and our self-worth is really invested in being successful at whatever we're doing, doesn't that interfere then with that excitement of that adventure,
Well, I don't
getting
think,
everything firing?
sure. I don't think we should measure our success that way. That's very external, and that sets you up for, if you think the only way you can feel good about yourself is to, I don't know, be the head of the company or the A student or whatever. Let's take the head of the company. At some point, you're going to be too old to be in the company. And does that make you worth less? Of course not. I
Well,
think
most retired people are
feel
struck with
that way.
that very thing,
Yeah,
and our society, our media, all of it is telling us that you have to be perfect. You have to have the
yeah.
perfect figure, you have to have the perfect makeup, whatever,
Well,
to
but
be
Gwilda, you need
okay.
to understand that you're either imperfectly mindful or perfectly mindless. As soon as there's no possibility of failure, you're no longer present. You're not there to experience the event.
Just not engaged.
Yeah.
So we're just about out of time in this
Ah,
quarter, but we have so many myths about what is and what isn't possible. How can we start weeding our way through those?
well, I think we should. There are two things we should be saying to ourselves all the time. The first one is like you're a little kid. You're like, who says so? Where does this come from? You can't do this. People can. The other is, why not? And make it a game. But for anything, there's every time actually that something doesn't work, there's an opportunity. You keep dropping the glass that you're drinking from. All right. Well, that means you should design a glass that is less likely to drop. Whatever it is that doesn't work gives us an opportunity to ask how we can make changes so it works better.
Well,
Everything. Go
it
on.
is time for that station
Oh,
break. Please stay with us as Ellen and I continue to explore untapped human potential. This is Mission Evolution, www.missionevolution.org. What are the myths that bind us? This is Mission Evolution, missionevolution.org. We're continuing our discussion with Dr. Ellen Langer. Her website, ellenlanger.me. Ellen, what are the myths about risk, decision making, and prediction?
Okay, well, risk. You see somebody do something that you yourself wouldn't do, and you go, oh my God, that person is a risk taker. But the person who's doing whatever it is not saying, what the hell, I could kill myself, I'm going to do it anyway, or let me buy the stock so I'll go broke. The person, everybody's action makes sense from their perspective, or else they wouldn't do it. That means that the person who buys a stock, at the moment they're buying it, believes the stock is going to go up. All right. No matter what they tell you. So let's say you're driving in the car with me, and I'm going to make a turn at 80 miles an hour. You're scared to death, right? And you say, oh my gosh, is she a risk taker? So when my belief in my competence exceeds your belief in your competence, you see me as a risk taker. I'm not taking that turn because what the hell, who cares? Maybe we'll die, maybe we won't. I'm taking it because I believe it's going to be successful. And it's very different in how you organize yourself with this. Let's say, so Mark Spitz is great diver, is going to dive into a small pond. He's not taking a risk. He knows how to dive, right? Andrea and what's his name? Mario Andretti, race car driver. When he's taking that turn at 80 miles an hour, he's not taking a risk in his mind. He has the skill. So if you want to be able to do something that you're afraid to do, the answer is not to get a coach or tell you so you can do it, you can do it. Just have the guts, and you can drive that car that way, dive into the water that way, buy the stock, whatever it is. The answer is to learn the task better. You want to be able to take the turn at 80 miles an hour, learn how to drive better. You want to be able to be not afraid to dive into a small pond, learn how to swim and to dive better, and so on. If you and I were given an opportunity, we had to pay a lot of money. Let's say, we should pay $500,000, wherever we get it from, to take a psychology test. Now, I would take the bet. I would suggest, I don't know, you probably wouldn't take the bet, but I'm not taking it because I'm a risk taker. I'm taking it because I know psychology. So you see what I'm saying? So it's not, if I only try hard, I can do it. It's learn about whatever it is you're trying, and then your performance will exceed the person next to you who thinks you're taking a risk.
So where does prediction fit in here?
Okay, people believe they can predict, but prediction is largely an illusion. We can predict for groups. So let's say if we had an auto body place, and there are 100 Mercedes, we can predict that most of them will probably start if we turn the key in the ignition. Okay, just as we have a drug, and we test the drug, and the drug will probably work for a certain number of people. The mistake is thinking that every single Mercedes there will necessarily start. The drug will necessarily work for every person. Think about Michael Jordan. If he shoots 100 baskets, he's going to get most of them in, but not necessarily all of them. And so when you're predicting, you're trying to predict the individual case. And, so is this going to be a good party I'm invited to? How could you possibly know? If I said to you, you and I are at a party and we see Jim and Mary fighting, and I say to you, Gwilda, are they going to get divorced? You'd say, how do you know? People fight, right? Now, let's say we didn't have that conversation. We both see them fighting. 2 weeks later, we find out they're getting a divorce. People mistakenly say, I knew it. You should have seen the way they were fighting at the party. So we confuse looking back, looking forward. Post-dicting is easy, where you know what Monday morning quarterbacking is what it's called. You know the outcome, and you create a path that makes it seem as if it had to be that way. Going forward, we can't know.
So, what is the illusion of control? While
So
we're talking illusions.
yeah, this is what I did my dissertation on and started this about 45 years ago. And at that point, I was like many of your audience. I was rational, in the negative sense of that word. And so when you see people doing things that seem unusual, we say, you see somebody talking to a slot machine. Okay, that seems to be an illusion of control. But as I started studying this more and more over all the different decades, I realized that it's a mistake to call it an illusion. It's a belief in control. The person perceives they have control. When you perceive you have control, you organize yourself more, differently. You feel open to the world, open to possibility, and it's a happier state, and I dare say a healthier place to be, to believe that you have control. Now, ultimately, we can't know if we have the control or we don't have control. But the belief that we have control is an organizing principle that keeps us happy and healthy.
So it's about time in the show, Mary, when I get to ask you, what is your mission?
My mission, I have two missions. The first, and as represented in all of the books and work that I've done, is to make people aware that they have more control over their health and happiness than they currently seem to realize. And that would, with each new person who comes to understand this, it brings me more and more joy. The next mission that is not entirely separate from that is right now the world consists mindlessly in a vertical. We have the winners on top, the losers on the bottom. And I feel bad for those losers because, those of us on top, what does it mean to be on top? If you knew what I didn't know, you'd probably want to put me someplace else on the continuum. And I want to take the vertical and make it horizontal, where we recognize that everybody doesn't know something, everybody knows something else. Everybody can't do something, everyone can do something else. So it's not I am better than you. I'm better at this particular thing at this particular moment than you are. But you certainly can teach me as much as I can teach you.
Beautiful mission. Beautiful mission. So tell me, Ellen, how do we think ourselves into health?
Well, what we do is recognize that all of the times we've already done this, that you have some event and you just, and you have a cold, but you have to go to the event. Somehow the cold just goes away. And maybe the other side of it also, pay attention to all of the times you let yourself be sick and you couldn't find the reason for it. I think maybe the best way to think yourself well is just to accept this mind body as one. So much data, we didn't talk about it, but we have a study where we have people have wounds and they're in front of a clock, and we make the clock go twice as fast as real time, half as fast, or real time. The wound heals based on your expectations, not on real time. We have work with diabetics. Your blood sugar level follows perceived time. I guess it's pay attention to all the work that's done on placebos. I dare say that I've written several books that they all touch on them. How to get yourself to notice that what you want is a thought away. Maybe the best answer is to simply change your thought and see what happens.
That's some pretty good advice, isn't it? If we change our mindset, it's amazing what can happen.
Yeah. Yes, indeed.
Um, do you feel that at this time, most people's mindset are set exterior from something outside rather than what they're choosing?
Um, well, I think that for sure the limits we place on ourselves are handed to us. That it's foolish to think you could run more than the 26 miles for a marathon, to think that when you get older you're not going to suffer poorer vision or memory loss and so on. All of those are externally given to us. There's also probably a little secondary gain with some of the problems we take on. That sometimes it's fun to have a cold. You get to stay in bed and you get to have, eat, watch television, and without the world bothering you. But I think that it's more fun to realize that even our colds are psychologically given to us.
It's amazing. I've kind of idly watched how many people, because I work with death a lot, how many people die the way they've chosen to, even though they've unwittingly chosen it.
Yeah, yeah. It's interesting because I have a lot of people calling me, with family members or they themselves facing these terrible diagnoses, terrible prognoses. And, what I say to them is that you have to make decisions for yourself. But if it were I, and I thought that I only had a month left to live, I wouldn't want to waste my time complaining. I'd want to actually be out there living to the fullest. And I think people, again, I give you a one-liner, people make a mistake by spending all their time as they're older trying to add more years to their lives, when instead they should be adding more life to their years. And when you do that, it's actually good for your health, and you probably live longer.
Well, Ellen, unfortunately, we are out of time. Thank you so much for coming on the show and
Yeah,
sharing your wisdom.
this is my pleasure. Thank you.
You bet. Our guest this hour has been Professor of Psychology, Dr. Ellen J. Langer. Ellen is the author of 12 books. Her latest, The Mindful Body, Thinking Our Way into Chronic Health. To find out more about Ellen, where you can find her books and all she has to offer, visit her website, ellenlanger.me. This has been Mission Evolution with Gwilda Wiyaka. For more information or to enjoy our past archives, visit www.missionevolution.org. But please be sure to join us right here next time, as this mission will continue, bringing information, resources, and support to our rapidly evolving world.